Welcome back to FreightWaves Now on this Wednesday morning. It's time to welcome our next live guest of the morning. We've got Joe Antoshak with us, our senior editorial researcher, talking all about this year's FreighTech 100, which of course is one of my favorite lists. Anthony, I know that you love it as well.
That's right. I can't get enough of it. Joe, thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks, Kaylee. Thanks, Anthony. Happy to be here.
So let's kind of dig right into it. We know that the FreightTech 100 lists our top 100 companies who are involved in freight tech making gigantic waves. Last year, we had some really big names on the top. Of course, Uber Freight's always up there, Amazon Freight, we had P44, we had FreightTech up there. What are you expecting out of this year's list?
Yeah, so that's a great question. First of all, I want to say that we received nominations for more than 420 companies this year, which is a staggering number of companies in the freight tech space. And there were a ton of really great ones. We did have to narrow down, of course, to this 100 company list that you see here. And I think that it's just going to be really exciting to see who winds up in the top 25 come November when we announce at F3.
The corner. Before we jump into some of that, Joe, one of my favorite things about the FreightTech 100 is seeing who was able to move up from their placement last year. Do you have any expectations that they're going to see any shifts in this updated FreightTech 100? And do you have your eye on anyone in particularly? Not that you might know some results.
Yeah, well, right. FreightWaves is actually not a part of the top 25 voting. We have an independent auditing firm that does that. But yeah, so last year's top 25, the top five were Project 44, Platform Science, Amazon Freight, Baton, and FreightTech. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone in that group falls out, stays in. We had Tesla at 10. I think it's inevitable that there's going to be some movement for sure.
Right.
But who knows how it'll shake out.
So it's interesting that we mentioned Baton as one of last year's top five in the FreightTech 25, the top 25 of that, because as we know, Baton was just purchased by Ryder, and now they are falling underneath the Ryder umbrella. So when we look at this, there's obviously been a ton of mergers, acquisitions going on in the last year in the freight tech space. We've seen some companies now had to pull back and scale back their operations, or maybe kind of take a back seat to their operations as we move into this tighter economic time. How much of an effect do you think that the current economy is going to have on some of those companies and where they land, especially if we're talking about a company like Baton, who just recently has now seen a purchase?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think probably what you'll see is right. You'll see the more long-running traditional names, maybe like Ryder, for instance, move up a little higher on that list because they now have more involvement in this, sort of top of the line freight technology. You see it in the Mercube FreightWaves Supply Chain Tech Index that we released earlier this week. Right. The freight tech space has been booming as of late. We're seeing a bit of a downturn as part of kind of the larger market, but it's still very strong, right? So these companies are continuing to grow. They're continuing to innovate, and some of them will be hit, I think, by sort of the recent market conditions. But overall, the space is still very strong.
Joe, when I'm just thinking about, I just need to see this list. I need to know. But when will it officially be revealed?
Yeah, so the FreightTech 100 is out now. 10 minutes ago, roughly, we put it online. There's an article up on FreightWaves.com, and then on our award page, all the FreightTech 100 are listed there. And so what happens now is these companies are going over to our auditing partner. That's going to conduct voting I think 87 industry experts, executives. They're going to narrow down the list to 25, and then we'll announce that at F3, November 3rd.
And then, Joe, it's interesting that you mentioned the Mercube partnership that we just announced yesterday, because as we talked about, it's this index that really measures kind of interest and investment in the supply chain tech space specifically. Is there any type of overlap between those companies that are listed and used on the index and our FreightTech 100, or do they kind of like feed off of each other? Is it like this kind of symbiotic relationship almost?
That's a great question. I would have to look at the methodology of it. I'm not actually sure exactly who is tracked on that index, but I do very much think of it as like a symbiotic relationship. Like that index, while it may not be a perfect analysis of sort of how strong the space is, or like how the companies on the FreightTech 100 are doing, or how much capital is available to them. I think it is an interesting way to sort of track kind of overall sentiment for FreightTech.
And Joe, speaking of sentiment, you also are a huge help in some of our surveys and things like that we put out here at FreightWaves for our awesome research team. Are there any surveys that you have out right now, or anything like that has been recent that you can talk to, or that you found intriguing?
Yeah, so one of the things we're getting off the ground in Q4 is going to be these freight sentiment indexes. We're going to look to start tracking overall freight sentiment with a variety of different factors, including business conditions, but then also investment conditions, sort of the worker conditions, and we're going to look to split that up between carriers, shippers, and 3PLs. And I think it's going to be really interesting watching that change over time.
I definitely agree with that, especially because we kind of talk about, we have, of course, the DHL Pricing Power Index, but that's kind of two-sided, right? You're either in the favor of the shipper or in the favor of the carrier. And so this seems like it'll kind of add some color into that gray area that lies between that. And then, Joe, why do you think that it's important for us to bring kind of that spotlight to those in-between areas? And what does it add? Obviously, more data is mostly always better, but what does that kind of add?
Yeah, well, I think it's really just the sort of thing we do here at FreightWaves, which is just like continue to add context to an industry that has, until recently, I think, been somewhat underserved, when it comes to data and analysis. And, we're just looking to add as much nuance as we possibly can. So it's like, here's a way that we can add a little bit more nuance to the industry, and in an interesting and useful way. So let's do it.
I'm looking forward to those sentiment indices for sure. And Joe, if people want to reach out to you, chat, talk anything about the freight industry supply chain research, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, send me an email. It's just the letter J, Antoshak, Antoshak, at freightwaves.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. And then head on over to freightwaves.com to find the list of that FreightTech 100 and see if your company made it. I think, do we have a sneak peek right there? Let's see. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's see. I see Amazon Freight. I see ArcBest. I see HubTech. I see some big names up there. Powerfleet Plus. I need my glasses.
I just see astigmatism everywhere. But Joe, thanks so much for joining us this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you again before too long.
All right. Thanks, guys.